Welcome to the third day of our retreat. It is once again a joy for me to bring to you the story of the wards. I'm going to share the screen so we will have our third day theme today. And the theme for our day is the legacy of the wards, the legacy of Ernest and Phoebe Ward. I want to call it lived missiology because it is something that they lived, but they didn't have much time to reflect on it. And I'll define what I mean by that through these five words or ingredients of a lived missiology. My finding from the Ward research is being summed up at this point here, and I invite you to journey with me looking at the activistic, holistic, orientalist, dialogical, and holiness missiology that we derive from the life and mission of Ernest and Phoebe Ward. Activistic missiology, this missiology depends on the works per se, as done by the missionary. This is a missiology of the sunrise, which refers to the mission work, which is done in like practical context and not in an isolated setup where the reflection on mission work takes place. So when it is a mission work that is being reflected upon, or the mission activity that becomes the focus of a reflection or theoretization, then you have to call it the missiology of the sunset. And many scholars would come into that category who don't necessarily engage in mission, but do a lot of research and writing work, and thereby have that missiology at the sunset. And here our protege person whom we are focusing on, Ernest, didn't have much time to write about his own experiences and theorize the methods and models that he was engaged in doing mission. And that's why his mission is called activistic missiology. He was an activistic person, undocumented are his achievements. So what are the characteristics of activistic missiology? These are always engaged in rural outreach. They are part of urban mission activities, evangelism and church planting, campus construction, like Ward built mission bungalows wherever he went. Whenever he had to need of a building, he would construct it by himself. So going where needed was his theme. He had no time to sit back and reflect on the methods and approaches. So that's why I would say the wards were exceedingly activistic with little or no time to write books and reflect on their strategies. There were one or two publications, but they were different. And there was one, I will talk about it at the end, which gives some detail about it, but theorization of the whole mission work, which would call it a proper missiology, is definitely not of his thing. So that's why he's a missiologist of the sunrise, who focuses on going out and doing the mission work. So from this lens, we have another one. This is holistic missiology. Holistic missiology is the most important ingredient here because this is the missiology of the social work and much more than that. And I categorize Ward's works, all of the works in this category. These are those works. Orphanage work, first of all. Ernest Ward was greatly engaged along with Phoebe Ward in orphan care in 3 states. We are talking about Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Gujarat. And that was undivided Madhya Pradesh. Now, if you say it will be 4 states, including Chhattisgarh. And this was done during most difficult times. Hinduism, with all its fatalism, would not care for the destitute and needy because they were suffering their karma. So, or bhagya. And not so with the Christian philosophy of life. And that's where Ernest and Phoebe come in and care for hundreds of orphans, the orphans who went on to become significant part of the Mukti revival in 1904, 1905. So there is that huge connection there. But the seeds of those revivals were also laid during the orphanage work. Then Ernest and Phoebe were engaged in running schools for boys and girls. Education and vocational education was very important parts of ministry for them. They wanted to train the boys and girls to be independent and literate and to be able to make sense of life themselves, have a better life. So orphanage care and school work, went hand in hand, and at the same time, the famine relief work provided hope and dignity for the hopeless and the dead. Many people were not even touched their own family members' dead bodies. They had, so much of stigma, especially if somebody had died in sickness and things like that. Ernest and Phoebe would do their best to give them a proper burial. Hundreds were dying around them, and the Lord had kept them alive in central India, and they served till their, they did their best in providing the resource and serving the nation. How much gratitude should Chhattisgarh and central India have for these people? Unfortunately, they remain unknown. And that's why it is important to look at their mission and their life. So famine relief work was a significant contribution to saving the people of India in that time. We're talking about the great famines of 1899 and that time frame, 1899, 1901. So it's the worst in history. So the famine relief work was there, and they partnered with other missions. They did really amazing work, and the Lord sustained them and gave them fruits. And of course, people came to faith during that time. Medical work continued. It started like carrying some medicines to villages as they went for outreach and evangelism. And so those things were part of it. Okay, so carrying the medicine was a very simple act of kindness to people who had no access to any medication. But that laid roots for the great ministry that would later on be known as Umri Christian Hospital. Of course, the Yardis were there, building on a foundation that was there. The foundation was these village clinics that had gone around. And we can always trace back the roots of these great ministries that are there to the initial and simple, small seed sowing works of Ernest and Phoebe. And finally, under holistic missiology, you would see the seminary. Ernest was pioneering in his effort to start Marathi medium Bible school at Yavatmal with other missionaries, of course. And they did together, this foundational work was done to train local ministers of the gospel. And then from there, you have, Klein come in, missionary Klein, and then building Union Biblical Seminary, full-fledged training center in Yavatmal. And even I'm a proud graduate of Union Biblical Seminary. And it's amazing to know that the seeds that was shown for a Marathi medium, simple, small training center to all the way Union Biblical Seminary as a full-fledged mission, roots connecting to this mission is a great vision that the wards had. To conclude this section on holistic missiology, I would say evangelism and social work went hand in hand in the ministry of the wards. Okay, so they did not separate spiritual and secular work as such. The third one we are looking at is Orientalist missiology, and I have briefly touched on their approach to culture and challenges section. How did they respond to the contextual challenges? And I said, how did they promote local language over against the American or Western language and culture? They were very much Orientalist because of these reasons, that they could almost sound anti-Western because they didn't promote English at all. They didn't have the dress code that other missionaries would have or other British officers would have at that time. They promoted indigenous lifestyles and things like that. Above all, the most important characteristic of the Orientalist missiology is that they were independent church. They promoted independent church. The Three Self movement was quite, getting fame at that time, and wards were definitely practicing it. This is about the self-supporting, self-governing, and self-propagating church. So they were involved in it, and as a result, in 1916, the first Free Methodist church that was built in Yavatmal was built completely by indigenous support, which is a powerful history for us as Indian FMCs to see that, yes, there has been a foundation laid on doing independently or God-dependently work for us, not negating the contributions of the friends from the Western countries and affluent nations, but to be able to do something humble on our own, depending on the Lord for the provision, is something very Orientalist. And the wards were Orientalist and thus contextual in their approach. And this is a great legacy that we can always build on. There is another one that I want to point out. The interreligious encounters characterized Ward's mission so much. He was talking with Hindus, he was talking with Muslims, he was reaching out tribals, he was doing all these things. And to his converts, he would call trophies of grace. Ernest and Phoebe had a new name for their converts. They would call them trophies of grace. And there are a few of them that I want to mention. Job Ward, whose original name was Juman Sheikh, was his first convert from the Muslim background. And then there was Mrs. Jiwar B in Rajnandgaon, Chhattisgarh, who was their convert among the Muslims. So Juman Sheikh went on to become a pastor, who went on to study in North India in Bareilly, and he went on to be a pastor. In fact, Wards had not adopted him, but he himself took their name. As that's amazing, it was their impact. Among the Hindu converts, there was Trimbak and others, but the most important name is Narayan Vaman Tilak. Till this day, and until you look at my book, most of the books that talk about Narayan Vaman Tilak, even his biographer, anybody, they do not mention the name of the missionary who brought the gospel to Narayan Vaman Tilak. And I'm for the first time revealing it that it was Ernest Ward who was, journeying in a train in which Narayan Vaman Tilak was also traveling, and they happened to meet there, and Ernest gave him the gospel and talked about Christ. And from there, the friendship was built. And although Narayan Tilak was baptized by others in Mumbai, it was Ernest Ward who had planted the seed of the gospel and provided initial mentoring to Narayan Vaman Tilak, who was working in Rajnandgaon at that time at the Raja's Palace, where Ernest was a frequent witness. So this is an amazing story of Narayan Vaman Tilak, who is famous Marathi poet. Not even one church would not be singing his songs. Like everyone is singing his hymns, his Marathi Christian hymns. So that impact is there. And Ernest also was instrumental in bringing Loka, a Korku tribal boy, to faith. And with him, he was able to construct a Korku grammar book. And that book now is available at the British Library. It is important to note this kind of interreligious encounters and the fruits in his ministry, which definitely can be called a dialogical missiology. Of course, Ernest didn't have time to expound on these things, did not do Mission of the Sunset, but we have much to learn and appreciate. The final thing in his contribution or legacy I want to highlight is the holiness missiology, I would call it. And this is coming from his life and his work. Both Ernest and Phoebe lived a life, saintly life, simple life, and their central message to the people was holiness. They strived for Christian holiness from their conversion on, and they continued to proclaim holiness throughout India and in America whenever they went, and also through letters, they will talk about this. To the point that by 1910, Ernest had become the founding president of India Holiness Association. And the meetings were held annually, and this was like an ecumenical kind of group. Interdenominational fellowship took place under the umbrella of India Holiness Association. Methodist, Free Methodist, Brethrens, and Marathi Mission, and name it, Nazarene, and all those different groups, ministers would come, missionaries would come and have the meeting. So the passion Ernest Ward represented was that holiness was central to the whole thing. He said, there can be no permanent happiness without holiness. He said, there can be no permanent happiness without holiness. Holiness and happiness are eternally wedded together. And with that, I would come to a close and call to celebrate the Wards. The Wards did amazing mission in Central India, and that was during one of the toughest time if you look at their holistic work time frame. They remain unacknowledged, undiscussed, and uncelebrated as a missionary couple. And my humble effort is to bring their story to light so that we can connect our own stories with them and be grateful for what they have done for India and beyond in the spirit of Free Methodism. Initial experiences were published slightly in Echoes from Bharat Khand, and there is a small biography by their daughter, Ethel Ward, called Ordered Steps. But the detailed study, first ever detailed scholarly study, comes to you in Lived Missiology, and I recommend you to go through that. and also support my ministry in India. Once again, thank you, Dr. Land, for the opportunity to share the word story with us in this August forum. And I'm so thankful for the privilege to minister along with Pastor Mark Morrison and others. Wish we had some time for questions and comments, maybe some other time. So thank you so much once again for journeying with me through the story of the words. God bless you. God bless us all. Amen. Praise God.